Question is, why does the federal government continually block efforts to install an independent anti-corruption commission?
I'm actually going to hold it on you, Paul, for a minute and go to you, Tanya, on this. And there was a proposal, wasn't there, from Helen Haynes, an independent, setting out just this type of body. Why didn't Labor fully get behind that?
Well, we went to the last election saying that there would be a federal anti-corruption commission if we had been elected. We think there's a lot of merit in Helen's proposal, and we've been working with her.
But it's dead now for lack of support.
Well, we would like to see a really strong, functioning federal integrity body. And what Paul is proposing, what his government's proposing, wouldn't be allowed to investigate complaints made from whistleblowers. It wouldn't be allowed to decide on its own to investigate a matter that it's interested in. It couldn't look at anything that had happened before the body was established. And a lot of judicial figures and others would tell you that what the government's proposing is weaker, is worse than having nothing at all, because in fact you could refer things off to this toothless tiger and they'll just disappear. The government will be able to say, oh, well, that's been referred off, nothing to see here, and who knows if we ever hear of those issues again. That's
the criticism of what the government's putting forward. And I say before, Helen Haynes had a proposal as well that would have had public hearings, could have followed up from whistleblowers, a lot of the things that you've outlined. So you're talking about something that is similar to a standing royal commission.
Well,
what's the meat on the bone? What is the detail?
I think the problem with simply referring these things off to royal commissions is if you are a member of the public and you hear of some corrupt behaviour, or you are, you witness corrupt behaviour, who do you report it to if there isn't a royal commission at the time? That's why I think it's very important to have a standing anti-corruption body that can decide on its own to investigate issues that it's interested in, can take reports from anonymous whistleblowers, can make findings of corruption. I think Paul's model, it wouldn't even be able to make findings of corruption. I do respect this idea that people are innocent till proven guilty. I understand why people are concerned about that, but the response to that is not to have a weak, half-assed approach that really does nothing to address corruption.
Paul, respond to that.
Well, our proposal for a Commonwealth Integrity Commission will have the powers of a standing royal commission the same powers as the Royal Commission to investigate criminal corruption at the Commonwealth level. So there's a serious mechanism that we've proposed. There's almost $150 million in funding that we've got committed for it. We've been working through a serious methodical process. Exposure draft last year.
It certainly has been methodical. It's been a very, very long time.
Because these are important design issues. And we have seen in New South Wales, and we've seen other instances of problems with design flaws in organisations like ICAC. So it's important that we get this right. Ultimately, we've got a serious mechanism there. But we do believe that there are significant challenges with the way ICAC operates, essentially the reversal of the presumption of innocence. And we don't want to see that replicated at the Commonwealth level. That's why we've carefully designed a mechanism that we believe will be effective, and we're working carefully through a consultation process.
Well, nobody else thinks it's going to be effective, though.
Zara, what do young people think? Because a lot of young people, of course, reading your news site. Are people really exercised about this now after Gladys Berejiklian's resignation?
They certainly are. And I just wanted to say to the Minister's point that I think that the episode with Gladys Berejiklian last week really moved it from an abstract concept of this random policy idea that young people couldn't really sink their teeth into a very genuine policy framework that will be really, really pivotal at the next federal election. So I think that young people are really yearning for some sort of trust relationship with the government. And when young people see...
Is that lacking now? Are they saying that there's a lack of trust?
I think that would be a euphemistic way to put it, Stan. I think that young people are significantly underwhelmed, would be the way I'd put it, with the way that politicians and the political class more generally.
And this is not partisan, this is not just one side.
No, I mean, absolutely. So we at the Daily Aus put a poll to our audience. We've got 250,000 young people and 81% of respondents. So that was something like 37,000 people said that they would like a federal ICAC tomorrow. And I think that that's significant in and of itself. It's young people caring, we're the next generation of voters, and it's going to be a big federal election issue.
Marc, you know, people can say we want this and we want it now and we want to hold politicians accountable. But then when you look at something like New South Wales ICAC, and 3 premiers now have gone as a result of these investigations, and then we see people leaving flowers outside Gladys Berejiklian's office and saying, why did you have to go, Gladys? Is there sort of mixed messages here from the public?
Well, I think it's important to note that Gladys resigned. I think some of the language around this is a bit confusing. Gladys chose to leave. Now, the circumstances around that are worth debating. I think they are. Look, the conversation around ICAC and Gladys is really fascinating to me because I think there's a slight difference of opinion around Gladys inside New South Wales as opposed to outside New South Wales. I think people outside of New South Wales are quite confused as to why there is so much love for her. And I think her case is really specific because I think there was a sense to a large degree within New South Wales that she was trying to get a balance right between managing COVID and also sort of, you know, people's mental health, people's businesses. And I think... But Marc,
this wasn't about this.
No, I'm getting to it. Pete, I think that adds to why people liked her. It makes it a lot easier to focus on that when the issues around ICAC are so confusing. This case around her and ICAC is a genuinely confusing one to follow. And I think that's possibly why Gladys's case is confusing, because her competency around COVID was really clear, but the issues around COVID are a lot harder to follow. So I'm not sure she's necessarily the best test case for whether or not an ICAC should be rolled out nationally, because she's
an
complicated.
Interesting test case, right? Because there are unintended consequences associated with some of these things, right? There are people's lives that can be destroyed and years later be exonerated. She didn't choose to resign because she felt like it was a good time to go.
No.
She left because she felt there was no other option.
She'd also set a precedent that if you're being investigated by ICAC, you have to quit.
Right, and she lost her job as a result.
But the other public policy issue, as well as the very valid considerations that Alastair raises about people's reputation and whether they get a fair hearing and proper process, is that as a consequence of the way ICAC has operated, we've had a very successful Premier doing an outstanding job, leading a state through a really challenging situation, put in a position where she decided she had no choice but to resign. And so that needs to weigh up in the mix as you work out the institutional design that you think is appropriate.
But there can be a pro-Gladys sentiment, or people can like her, and there can still be questions to ask, as clearly there are in this case, Tanya.
I think that's exactly the point. You can like and respect a person, but if they have done the wrong thing, it doesn't mean that they're above the rules. Nobody's above the rules.
Under your model, or Labor's proposed model, and we're yet to see the full detail on this, would this be the expectation of everyone who was brought before it, that you have to resign or step aside?
Well, I think it's way too early to speculate on things like that. What we want to see is a strong integrity commission that does allow whistleblowers to make complaints, that is able to
But we know how easily that can be politicised, Alastair, can't we? And if this is a test case, and if there are some precedents here, if you have people saying, well, how come Minister X doesn't step aside when Gladys Berejiklian stepped aside or resigned when she was brought before ICAC? You can see what you're setting up here, can't you, Alastair?
Well, one of the topics tonight, of course, is the internet. Go and look on the Twitter threads on people's presumption of guilt well prior to any form of fair and due process. And all I would urge Minister, an opposition to do is, if something is set up, that there is a fair process, that it's swift, there's a chance for people to actually put their case, but for and against, and that there is an opportunity for people to be exonerated quickly. There are too many lives destroyed. And again, I just want to say, I'm not pro-corruption, but you know, people make decisions, and sometimes those decisions are going to be judged by an electorate or by a court as wrong and bad. That's fine. I just don't think the solution is always a corruption inquiry.
Zara?
I keep hearing this, and I'm really curious because, I mean, at least from an outsider's perspective, we got notification from ICAC that the investigation had expanded to include the former Premier, and then mere minutes later, we had the Premier coming out with her resignation. So what is this subversion of the presumption of innocence that we are seeing online, because there wasn't really that window even online for people. I know that...
But are you saying her resignation is an admission of guilt? Because that's what it sounds like, right? Because she hasn't... She resigned because she had no option.
She has set an expectation with other ministers in the past that if you are suddenly the focus of ICAC...
That you step aside.
That you step aside.
Which may well then carry over into whatever federal body we see as well.
Of course.